what is the origin of conditioning. How do you explore such a question is really what I'm getting to. How do you explore such a question? I don't believe coincidence exists. That doesn't really offer me much. That doesn't do much for our inquiry or for our conversation even. I don't believe, well, okay, let's move on to something else then, because you don't believe. I don't believe that God exists and you're a Christian. Well, that's sort of the end of our conversation. There's no inquiry. So could coincidence exist? Could synchronicity exist? Now, my question was, how do you explore such a question? How do you explore the question of coincidence and synchronicity? Coincidence implying that it is a random, accidental, unexpected coinciding of two events. Synchronicity implying that there's an order to the occurrence of those two events, and those two events are related to one another. They're connected to one another somehow. How would one actually explore that? With such an inquiry, you have to stay very still. You have to stay very attentive. The attention has to become incredibly sharp. Otherwise, it will simply revert to what's already known. Not that that is truth, just what is already known. And that will almost inevitably imply belief of some kind. We even use that word. No, I don't believe in coincidence. Don't talk to me about coincidence. Don't talk to me about synchronicity. I don't believe in synchronicity. Coincidence is just something you want to be so. You make it up. Synchronicity, even worse. You're making it up all the time. Coincidence is just a way of dismissing the potential for synchronicity. Just laziness. That's what I believe. What does it matter what you believe? There's no inquiry then. There's no real sharp, penetrating inquiry, a real looking at this thing, this question, this actually quite rich question, quite an illuminating question. Do you remember we talked about thought being a vehicle, a instrument with which to inquire. Thought can express an inquiry, a question. It can give form to the formless arising within us, the formless inquiry arising within us. Thought gives form to it. It can give expression to it. Now we can almost look at our inquiry. There's the inquiry. I wonder about this. I'm interested in self-knowledge. I'm interested in self-discovery, intimacy with life. I'm interested in the unknown, the unfamiliar. Thought gives form to a question inside of a formless, a wordless inquiry, a wordless impulse. And this impulse arises in a person unexpectedly. And from the moment that it arises, that person becomes interested in something beyond the known, beyond the visible. They become interested in something richer, something deeper. They have a sense that there's something more to life than meets the eye. The person doesn't control the arising of that inquiry, the impulse that emerges spontaneously, a moment in time. This impulse emerges and the person's mind begins to adjust. It's now interested, it's inquiring, it wants to know, what is this about? The sense of inquiry is beyond thought. Thought formulates the inquiry and then actually starts to take it back into the known. It says it wants to inquire beyond the known, but it inquires beyond the known with the known. So it runs into itself, keeps looping itself. It's not really stepping beyond the known, beyond the familiar, because it doesn't know how. It can only formulate the inquiry. It can't go into the inquiry. It can know about the path. It can have read about the path, heard about the path, been told about the path, but it can't go down the path. It has to stay behind. Something else has to go down the path, make the discovery, because thought isn't familiar with that. It doesn't know what it's looking at even. It doesn't recognize anything because this path is diametrically opposed to where its origin is, what its realm is. Its realm is in the familiar, the known, the memory, reaction to memory, reaction to conditioning itself. That's its realm, and now we're inquiring beyond that realm. Thought is only formulating the inquiry. Then when we start walking, we're at a little bit of a loss, because what to use now? If we don't have thought, we've used thought for everything else, to solve everything else, every other question that we've had about life, the mechanical universe, the circumstance that we're in, the environment that we're in. And yet when it comes to the aspect of existence itself, aliveness itself, the nature of being human, there isn't much that thought can offer us. Can analyze and make deductions from behaviors, psychological processes, chemical processes. It's not offering anything new. Just more detail about the visible, the known. So going beyond the known has to, by implication, mean going beyond time, beyond psychological time, which is thought. Thought giving rise and forming psychological time continuously. Reaction to thought, binding that time into the body. No discovery, just repetitive cycles, asserting themselves, expressing themselves. So we go beyond time, we start to observe without a preference, observe without an objective, and ultimately observe without an observer. Because the observer is thought, the assessor, the one that concludes, that categorizes, that reasons and judges. So we can't inquire with the observer. We can't really see while there is the observer. And this is seems like a huge paradox to thought. How can you do that? That's not possible. You can't look at anything without the observer. There's always an observer. There's always something looking, someone, some aspect looking out. It has no answer for this. It can't offer anything in this field, this space, this stillness. It can't offer anything there. It can't really explain anything. Its words seem contradictory or insufficient. And yet we have no choice. We can't genuinely know without that quality of exploration. We can't genuinely know. We're just accepting because we're devoted to this person or that thing or this philosophy or that religion. We want what is said to be true. We have a deep investment in it, an emotional, psychological, physical investment in it. And so our ability to see is immediately corrupted. We're blind before we even start. So in the inquiry, as far as coincidence and synchronicity is concerned, giving form to the inquiry is not valueless. It just gives form to the inquiry, and it's part of humanness to communicate that, maybe even communicate that to another person, or just communicate it to oneself. This is the inquiry. Another astute mind could contribute to that inquiry by questioning the origin of the inquiry, by questioning the source of that inquiry. What drives that inquiry? Is the inquiry even real for the inquirer? Or has the inquirer just borrowed the inquiry from someone else or something else, and is now trying to pursue it because it appears to be, it's said to be a worthwhile inquiry? Or has the inquiry actually emerged out of the stillness within this questioner, this inquirer? A genuine, authentic bubbling up of a question and interest. When that bubbling up occurs, there's complete attention given to it, but not to solve it, not to come to a conclusion. Complete attention given to that quality that is emerged inside, the curiosity that is emerged inside. Now, instead of sitting and contemplating it and trying to figure it out, either via discussion or via internal dialogue, reading, listening, adding, reforming algorithms, new outcomes, new conclusions, same algorithms, or same content of the algorithms, just slightly differently organized. So if we didn't do any of that, then that complete attention would expand into our everyday life, the aliveness itself, the expression of aliveness, which is moment to moment, our life, all its relationships, all its interactions, all its challenges, its corruptions, its distortions, its joy, its kindness, its grace at times. And through all of those relationships and this complete attention, we start to see without a need to see. We start to see without an objective to see, without a premeditated conclusion. And what we see is the expression, the meeting of our question, the harmonizing of our question. We see the expression in what is around us that harmonizes the question. In other words, the energy, the quality that is the question that has arisen creates a type of void, a type of field, the likes of when you pull two magnets apart. There's a field between them. And in creating that field, the field will naturally be balanced with something that meets that energy, that harmonizes that energy, that fills that void. If mind is there, then it will try to fill the void with what is already accessible to it. It will fill it with more of the visible, more of the known. If there's a stillness in the inquiry, a curiosity, a genuine willingness for the inquiry to fall apart altogether, for nothing to come of the inquiry, for something to come of the inquiry, for the inquiry to end, a complete structure of mind, a structure of being, a state of mind, for that to come to an end altogether. If there's a willingness for all of that to occur, in any of that to occur, then an answer can come through the living itself. And it's a living answer, an alive answer. You're seeing it as if you're looking at someone's jumper and seeing it's a blue jumper. It's a jumper. There's no negating it. It's very obvious. This is a jumper. That's the word we use for that particular thing that we're looking at. What we're seeing is very clear, in other words. It's very visible. It's not an opinion. Maybe with my wife, if I say it's sort of a greenish blue and she says, no, that's teal. And then I go, what's teal? What exactly is teal? Well, that's teal over there. Yes, okay. Slight difference in opinion. The shade is this or that. The word we use for that shade is different. I don't have that in my vocabulary, perhaps. Not talking about that, not the opinion of what is seen. The obviousness of what is seen. We could make it more obvious. There's a person. It's very obvious. There's a person over there. No one would negate that. So the seeing becomes as complete as that, as obvious as that. And the question dissolves. The question isn't answered by the intellect. It's not discussed by the intellect. The question is, its essence is an energy that has arisen inside. A quality that has arisen. It might not be an energy. Maybe the word is not necessarily correct. A quality, something has emerged inside that has this characteristic of an inquiry, an exploration, a question mark. And that question has been neutralized. It's been harmonized. The question isn't there anymore. The seeking actually stops then, because the seeking itself has been harmonized. It hasn't had time added to it. It's not about to be discovered somewhere in the future. It's also not an accumulation of ideas and concepts to add to the existent ideas and concepts. There's no addition here. In fact, there's a relinquishment of that altogether. And yet there's a harmony that arises that produces insight. The harmonizing of that energy we could call insight, the field of wisdom. Access to the field of wisdom. Access is through that threshold that is the magnetism that comes from the inquiry and the uncertainty, the openness, the infiniteness of that inquiry and the willingness within the inquiry. The lack of attachment to the inquiry, the lack of attachment to the answer, lack of attachment to outcome, lack of attachment to effect on the state of mind, lack of attachment to the effect on the inquirer. If it destroys the inquirer, that's okay. If it totally disrupts the inquirer's current state of being, that's okay as well. That type of inquiry will take us to a field of wisdom.